This is episode 4. I'm Logan Arblaster, and here with me today is Jack Hillgrove to talk about what has been a significant week in the Steelers offseason. Very busy week for you too, Jack. You started the week at the 5-alarm marathon, 2 to 4 a.m. shift, and I know you kept going after that because I produced for you until about 8 a.m., but you've been busy going at it all week. You were at mini camp for Aaron Rodgers, first day of media availability. You've been there throughout the week. Oakmont now this weekend. You were doing live hits today all the way up until 6:30, and you still made time to kick it around for a few minutes today, so I really appreciate that. How is it down there in Oakmont, Jack?
It is, well, first of all, Logan, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you asked me to do it. Happy to do it. It's hot, that's for sure, but it's definitely cooled off in the last couple of hours. And to be quite honest with you, I'm kind of surprised that a lot of these guys were able to score. I'm looking at the leaderboard right now, and we've got multiple guys, including JJ Spawn, the leader at 4 under. Again, this is coming at you after the first round on Thursday, but I'm shocked that these guys were able to score as much as they did. This was hyped up to be almost like carnage out here at Oakmont as far as the conditions, the rough, the green speeds are concerned. And these guys have been able to score quite a bit. So who knows if that'll stay put, but nonetheless, it's a really fun experience, and I'm glad that I'm here.
Yeah, I'm probably the last person to talk about when it comes to golfing. I really don't know much. I am a pretty good Wii golfer. I'm a pro at that, but it's great that you get to do that experience down there, and it's so great that you're still joining us. Jack's a sports reporter at WTOV, host on 93.7 The Fan. We've worked together several times, me behind the glass, him doing the cool things as the talent, and he's just the right guy. You're the perfect guy for everything we're going to talk about today with Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let's get into this thing, Jack.
It sounds like a plan, brother. Let's do it.
Rodgers' deal with the Steelers that he signed on June 7th is a 1-year contract that is worth $13.65 million, with $10 million of that guaranteed. It could be worth up to $19.5 million with incentives. Jack, you were down there for Rodgers' first day of media availability and his first day in the black and gold this Tuesday. It was crazy seeing him out there in a number 8 jersey with the Pittsburgh Steelers logo on his helmet, which, by the way, he already had some comments on his new helmet. But he got married. He said he was dealing with personal stuff in the offseason. I think the big question everyone wants to know is Aaron Rodgers all in this year in Pittsburgh?
No, I thought that from the minute that this saga began and that he didn't sign with the Steelers almost instantaneously, or sign with any team for that matter, almost instantly after he was cut from the Jets. It's not that he's not all in on the Steelers, Logan. It's that he's not all in on football. And I understand that the guy has been outspoken about some personal issues that he and people close to him are going on this offseason, and that he's got to take care of those people. And that's all well and good. But if you're not committed to football, you're not committed to football. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers is. I don't think that's going to change much. Ceiling, we're looking at maybe this team winning a playoff game with Aaron Rodgers in the helm, because when push comes to shove, he is the most talented quarterback to ever wear a Steelers uniform. I mean, I know that he's 41 now and past his prime, but nobody can throw the football better in a Steelers uniform at any point in their career than Aaron Rodgers could back when he was, winning MVPs as the quarterback of the Packers. So in that aspect, I think it's pretty darn cool. Seeing him and being able to ask him a question at the press conference was also cool, growing up watching him and growing up when he was a face of the National Football League. So that was, you had to try to put your journalism face on completely and not be a little starstruck in that regard. But to answer your question, no, I don't think he's committed. And the Steelers have themselves to blame. The Steelers have to look at the mirror for themselves, and they put themselves in this position, and they put themselves in a spot where they're glued to, for the next 8 months, a quarterback that's in his 40s, past his prime, coming off of an Achilles injury, that's not committed to the game. And to me, that is a really depressing way of looking at things in June, when we've got, the rest of mini camp and training camp to go. But it is what it is. And the Steelers, again, have to look at themselves in the mirror.
And I'm not surprised at all that that's what you said. I watched the entire 13-minute long press conference, and I had a lot of takeaways from it. I thought overall some of the things he said were good. It was encouraging to hear him say some things, being that he's going to be the starting quarterback, being that he is better than Mason Rudolph right now and Skylar Thompson and Will Howard. But to be completely straightforward and honest, I also was hearing things that was making me think that maybe this guy isn't all bought in. The one thing that really stood out to me, and I don't know how you feel about this, Jack, when he was talking about what he's looking forward to most now that he is in Pittsburgh, he was asked this by a reporter what he was looking forward to most. He said, "Great fan base. We've played there over the years, they play their music in the third and fourth quarters." And that was just all very awkward to me.
Great fan base. We've played here over the years. They even got their own song they play, late in the third or in the fourth quarter. But it's a special place to play sports. Just great blue-collar people, and I'm excited to meet some of the fans along the way.
I paused the press conference when I heard that because I couldn't believe it. It all struck me weird because it was almost like he was saying he still thinks of himself as a Packer or as a Jet. And I don't know if I'm looking too far into this or where are you at with that?
I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't notice it right away, but when you bring it up, I actually think it's worth to be somewhat concerned about. But to play devil's advocate to the situation, he was there for 24, 36 hours, it seemed like. So, I mean, yeah, I get it. You want the guy to be all in, and you want the guy to be your quarterback and be indoctrined with the Steelers and with the fan base. And I think some of that will come over time, especially when they play games, obviously. But you know, he was only there for one day, so I will give him the benefit of the doubt in that regard. But it doesn't change my overall opinion that I don't think he's completely bought in on the Steelers and bought in on football. It seems like he's bought in on Mike Tomlin, obviously very complimentary of that guy's career. And I think we all knew that that was going to happen. The talk up of Mike Tomlin in his press conference, it happened multiple times. But other than that, I don't know how committed he is to Arthur Smith. I don't know how committed he is to this organization, the Rooney family, because at the end of the day, and I asked him this question, is if how much were you considering other franchises? The Giants were thrown around. There was the speculation that he'd rather go to Minnesota, which I think is a whole other argument into or a whole other point into the argument of, yeah, he's not committed to this team because it seems like the Steelers might be his consolation prize. But when I asked him that question, and then when he responded and said, "Oh, when I was going through my process and when I was going through everything with Coach Tomlin, it came down to I either became a Steeler or I retired." And I think retirement was considered heavily, which again means he's not committed to playing quarterback in the National Football League this year. It'll be interesting. We could be wrong, but that's just my perception of it right now.
Jack Hillgrove with us talking Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers on the Logan Arblaster show. Really one of the all-time greats. I have to tell you, Jack, in the lineage we're building out here as Waynesburg University students out in the field, your name's always brought up still. I got to give you your flowers for paving the way for the rest of us. Really being one of those names that still gets brought up all the time in the hallways on the fourth floor. So it is great that you're doing this with me today. It's been a pleasure so far. And I know you're busy, so I'm only going to send a few more thoughts your way. I wanted to hit on that question that you asked Aaron Rodgers. I knew that was your voice when I heard it. It was a great question. He said that there were other teams involved. You mentioned Minnesota. Do you have a sense of that there was anything that was ever really materializing with the Vikings? Or was it just something that Aaron Rodgers was maybe using as a ploy to get things done quicker with the Steelers?
I'm no Vikings insider. I'm not gonna paint myself to be, but it seemed like listening to Vikings insiders and listening to the national talking heads talking about the situation is that the Vikings wanted to wait and see in OTAs and things of that nature in the offseason with JJ McCarthy. And I think they didn't really need to wait and see that much. I think that they were pretty hell bent on that guy being their quarterback this year. I mean, they invested the first round pick into him. So I do think that there was not much interest on Minnesota's side. But there was definitely interest on Aaron Rodgers' side, and I don't blame him, to be quite honest with you. I mean, you talk about both offenses, right? I mean, and you don't even really have to, if you follow the NFL, you don't even really have to think that hard. if you're a quarterback, which offense you would rather a quarterback. So Vikings or the Steelers. You got one of the best offensive lines in football, TJ Hawkinson, one of the best receiving tandems in all of football, and maybe the best single receiver in Justin Jefferson, and a Kevin O'Connell, offensive-minded head coach. Let's flip things to the Steelers. Mike Tomlin has de-emphasized the importance of quarterbacks since Ben Roethlisberger retired, and this offseason and the way that they've handled Aaron Rodgers fully symbolizes that. It's backwards, it's stupid if you ask me, but it's the way that they've done business. Arthur Smith was a failed head coach in Atlanta, and he's a lot better of an offensive coordinator than Matt Canada was, but we saw a lot of flaws in the offense last year under Arthur Smith with the lack of snaps for guys like Pat Fryermuth and George Pickens, 50, 60% of the snap count. And you've got guys like Michael Pruitt and Cordell Patterson seeing key snaps. That doesn't make much sense. In the skill department, it's just nowhere near as good as Minnesota's. I don't need to run through the guys on the Steelers versus the guys on the Vikings. So I don't blame Aaron Rodgers for wanting to play for Minnesota over Pittsburgh. That, I think, was the only other real option. I think in New York, the Giants kind of knew what their neighbors were dealing with in that regard and didn't want any part of it. Obviously, they employed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and drafted Jackson Dart. I don't think Aaron Rodgers' interest was really in the Giants and vice versa at that point. So I do really think it was the Steelers or retirement when it was all said and done. But if it was up to Rodgers, it would have been the Vikings and then the Steelers or retirement. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I felt like one of the storylines that kept being brought up was Brett Favre potentially, or following in Brett Favre's footsteps along those lines, being a Packer his whole career and then finishing off as a Viking, kind of forgetting about what happened in New York with the Jets. But now he'll try to do that as a Pittsburgh Steeler. And one of the names that you keep mentioning that keeps getting mentioned throughout is Mike Tomlin as the biggest reason that he came to Pittsburgh. Two guys that have not won a playoff game in a while. Aaron Rodgers hasn't won since 2021. Mike Tomlin hasn't won since 2016. So they fit perfectly from that regard. Mike Tomlin's thirsty to go out and get it. He promised a bunch of changes after last season's playoff loss in Baltimore. And Aaron Rodgers, he didn't sound like he had the same type of intensity. He didn't. But one of the things that he brought up in this press conference is comparing Darnell Washington to Mercedes Lewis. Darnell Washington is an absolute specimen, a guy I think should be utilized more. He's Rob Gronkowski 2.0 physically. I mean, physically, it's impossible to stop this guy. That was one of the only players that I heard Rodgers bring up unprompted to and just kind of on his own. So it will be interesting to see how Rodgers manages the personnel available to him this year. And if he's able to add those changes necessary that Mike Tomlin keeps talking about frequently, keeps saying that is going to be addressed, that they weren't able to do last season with Justin Fields and with Russell Wilson. With that said, Rodgers is going to throw the ball a lot. He threw the ball the second most times in the NFL last year. Arthur Smith, on the other hand, this is a run-first coach. The Steelers ran the ball a ton last year. They weren't very efficient at it. They brought in DK Metcalf, some of the best yards per catch in the entire league. And Artie Smith addressed that yesterday. He addressed what I'm talking about, saying that about them running the ball a lot, saying that they didn't bring those guys in just to run the wishbone offense, kind of in a half-hearted, joking manner. Is this going to be a different offense from last year where they were lining up under center, which seemed like nearly every play, and running the ball early and then running play action? Or do you expect to see a new look scheme with Rodgers?
I think the scheme will be similar. You know, you watch, and again, at minicamp, they're in shorts and helmets, and you got them, and it's the movement is different. Obviously, when you put the pads on, and you've got defensive ends chasing you. But it seems like Aaron Rodgers can move. I mean, they run that drill quite frequently in the individual portion of practice with the quarterbacks rolling out and throwing on the run a little bit. And Rodgers is still able to do so. So I think you'll see that. One of the differences I think you'll see, too, as far as utilization is concerned, is the middle of the field. I think a lot of that was because of Russell Wilson's height, just not being able to see the middle of the field as well as he used to, especially because he's not as athletic as he once was. Rodgers can do that, and Rodgers can throw a better football in the intermediate part of the field than Russell Wilson can. I think a lot of Russell Wilson's success at this point in his career is the moon ball that we talked about at nauseum last year. Rodgers still can throw a pretty damn good football. Like watching, and again, I understand that he's 41, and I'm not some football savant or guru, but watching Aaron Rodgers throw a football and seeing how it looks compared to a guy like Mason Rudolph or Will Howard, like you could see a drastic difference. So that's going to come in handy for guys like Pat Fryermuth. You brought up Darnell Washington. I sure as hell hope that it comes in handy for a guy like that because there are so many different things you're able to accomplish with a physical specimen like Mount Washington. And to be quite honest with you, I'm still intrigued at the idea of maybe bringing in Jonnu Smith too, if they can pull that off. The cap hits friendly familiarity with Arthur Smith, and he had a good year last year in Miami. I understand that they need a wide receiver too, but I think if Arthur Smith wants to, or what Arthur Smith wants to accomplish offensively, is utilize maybe 3 or 4 tight ends instead of 3 or 4 wide receivers. So you could see that if they get their way. And I think the biggest thing too, Logan, is the relationship with Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers. Now, granted, you've got a 17-game season and things can go south, but they went south with Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith. There was no chance that Russell Wilson was going to come back to play quarterback for the Steelers this year because the relationship between Arthur Smith, based off of everything that I've heard, was shot by the end of the season, and it wasn't even worth bringing that guy back. So if Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers can maintain a good working relationship, that's half the battle. And I think at that point, you're able to accomplish a little bit more schematically that Arthur Smith wants to if the quarterback is on the same page.
I think it's important to note that winning cures all in the NFL. And for the Steelers last season, they started 10-3, and everything was perfectly fine. Nobody was worried about the quarterback change except outside of the first week they made it from Fields to Wilson, that it was going on, and they were winning football games. And it got to a 10-3 start for the Steelers, and then everything fell apart from there. But people seem to forget how hard that end of the season was for the Steelers. It was the first time since the 1970s merger that a team played all of their divisional games in the last 9-game stretch like that. They also, the other teams that they didn't play that weren't part of the division were all teams that made the AFC NFC championship game. So when you're looking at it from a holistic approach, they got Caleb Johnson at running back in the draft. They made a bunch of additions to the defensive line. They did a lot of things that hurt them in the end of the season and in that playoff game in Baltimore. They addressed those issues, and they come into 2025 with Aaron Rodgers coming off a season that they started 10-3. I don't know if he's going to be better than Russell Wilson, but I really think he does have a good shot at doing so. And why I think that is because of quarterbacks' numbers coming 2 years off of an Achilles tear or a significant injury in their careers. Real quick here, I wanted to throw this in. Tom Brady, he tore his ACL in 2008. In 2009, 10-6 record, 28 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. In 2010, 14-2, 36 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That's his second MVP season that he did that. So 2 years removed from his significant ACL tear in 2008. Rodgers last season, 1 year removed from an Achilles tear, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Will he make a huge jump this year? We'll have to wait and see. And you might say, okay, that's ridiculous. You're comparing a younger version of Tom Brady to an older version of Aaron Rodgers. But let's look at it from another angle. Peyton Manning, career-threatening neck injury in 2011. Then in 2012, he throws for 37 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. That's not bad at all. All-time great quarterback in Peyton Manning. But 2013, Peyton Manning's 37 years old. He throws 55 touchdowns and only 10 interceptions, won the MVP, and set the single-season passing yards record with 5,477 yards. All right, so I'm not saying Aaron Rodgers is going to do what Tom Brady or Peyton Manning did, but we've grouped these players together their entire careers with almost everything else. So why can't we do that with this? And I do think he is going to have a very good shot in this new look Steelers offense of being better than Russell Wilson.
I'm glad that you brought that up because I agree with you. I think there's a chance that we see a rejuvenated Aaron Rodgers because he's one of the most talented to play the position of all time. And Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, maybe more so Peyton Manning than Tom Brady, but Aaron Rodgers is definitely more of a talented thrower of a football and player of quarterback than Tom Brady ever was. Tom Brady had to work his tail off to get everything that he got in this league, and that's why he's the greatest of all time. Aaron Rodgers has more pure God-given talent. So let's say that all comes to fruition, right? Aaron Rodgers rejuvenates. The Steelers go 11-6, hell, even 12-5, win a playoff game. That is the best that the Steelers have been in 8-9 years. Everybody and their mother has been talking about the amount of draft capital that the Steelers have in 2026, and they have all said the same thing. If they don't finish with a bad record, they'll be able to trade up into the top 10 and get their franchise quarterback, and then you can really start things over. Well, what if Aaron Rodgers does exactly what you say he did, and does exactly what I said, wins 12 games, playoff win? He's going to want to come back in 2026, and he's going to want to come back for more than $13.5 million.
Wait a minute. You think Aaron Rodgers could come back at age 42?
If he has a rejuvenated season, absolutely. Tom Brady played well into it. Aaron Rodgers, if he's physically capable of doing so, I think he can. The odds of it happening are, I think, slim. But I think there's a chance that next year isn't the last year as far as Aaron Rodgers' career is concerned. And the Steelers can put themselves in a situation where they might win 11, 12 games, and they might win a playoff game. Are they really going to let that quarterback walk if he wants to come back? And if they don't, then they're going to have to pay him more than they paid this past year. So then it comes to the question of, do you use the first-round pick on a quarterback next year? I think they still probably would, but it makes things so much more interesting. The point I'm trying to make is that I think everybody thinks it's a done deal, that Aaron Rodgers will play for 1 year and the Steelers will draft a franchise quarterback in the first round next year. And there's a very real chance that happens. But who's to say that Aaron Rodgers doesn't play well, takes the Steelers to contention, and then wants to come back to Pittsburgh in 2026? Then it's a whole different ballgame. And I think, while I don't think it's a great chance, I think there's a chance that might happen.
The Aaron Rodgers story, saga, whatever you want to call it, continues. That would be something else. If he won enough, if he surpassed what the Steelers have done at the end of the last almost decade, where they collapse at the end of seasons, I could also see that, now that you reason it that way, that the Steelers could stick to stability, stick to every way they can find to keep winning games and bring him back. But I do think, regardless, no matter what, when that countdown outside of Acrisure Stadium, Heinz Field, hits 0 and the Steelers are on the clock to draft, I think that they're going to select from what is a great pool of college quarterbacks this year, and Steelers Nation will be paying much more closer attention to college quarterbacks than they ever have, gearing up towards the 2026 draft. But it's Jack Hillgrove with us, wrapping up what has been an amazing show. Jack, a host on 93.7 The Fan and grandson of longtime voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Bill Hillgrove. But Jack making a name for himself, really, really doing great stuff in the field. One last question before I let you go here, Jack, and thanks so much again for doing this. How exciting is this week 1 matchup going to be? I mean, Aaron Rodgers in New York, both guys, Aaron Rodgers, Justin Fields, starting against the teams they started for last year. So a revenge game on both sides. A lot of the Steelers' schedule is shaped up to be an Aaron Rodgers revenge tour. There's the Chicago game, the Green Bay game in Week 8 really stands out to me. Who wins in Week 1? And is there a game you look on this schedule at that you're most excited for?
Sorry, Logan, I was trying to unmute my mic. From the Aaron Rodgers side of things, I think it might be a little bit intriguing. Not a little bit, definitely intriguing to go back to New York and try and stick it to them based off of, how he described his end of season situation with them, whatever you want to call it, on the Pat McAfee show. I think Aaron Rodgers definitely has something to prove. As far as I'm concerned, I don't really care about the Aaron Rodgers versus the Jets storyline. I look more towards the Sunday night game in Pittsburgh against his team that you more associate Aaron Rodgers with in Green Bay. I'm looking forward to him going back to Chicago and winning that game and the internet blowing up and saying, oh, Aaron Rodgers still owns the Bears no matter who he plays for. That could be an interesting matchup. And then, all the divisional games. And I think the one game that'll really stick out to see if these guys are contenders is that middle of the season. Well, not really middle of the season, week 13 against Buffalo at home. Buffalo is a team that has tried to win a Super Bowl the last several years with Josh Allen at the helm. That game at home in your house, if they want to compete to win a playoff game, they should win that game. And I think Buffalo is incredibly beatable outside of Josh Allen being the MVP quarterback. But yeah, there's a couple of games on here that you look at and you're like, probably not with at Detroit. I'm not super optimistic about at Baltimore. Not really optimistic about at Cincinnati on a Thursday night. I mean, they lost to a backup quarterback when they last played on a Thursday night in Cincinnati. They don't play well there. And that's about it. Maybe the Chargers week 10, Justin Herbert, Jim Harbaugh, another season. That might be a tough matchup. I think 10-7, 11-6 is extremely doable. If Aaron Rodgers does what I said that he could do in my last response, I think 12-5 is doable. But I think more in the range of 9-8 floor, 11-6 ceiling is where I lean. And I'll watch week 1. I'll talk about week 1 when it comes around, but I'm not super excited for Aaron Rodgers' return to the Jets as I am for him facing the Packers and the Bears.
There's a lot of window dressing games this year, and I think the Bears game, the Packers game, the New York Jets game, I think those are all going to end up being games that sort of disappoint from an entertainment standpoint. I do think the Steelers will win week 1. I think their final record is going to be, let's say, 11-6. I'll go with 11-6. So that's your ceiling. I'm going to say that's the Steelers' final record. And the game I'm most excited for is also the Buffalo game. Like you said, could be a game that could determine or give you a preview, foreshadowing into how far the Steelers go in January, if they're able to make a playoff run, and how Aaron Rodgers stacks up at 41 years old against the guy that just won the National Football League MVP. So, all right, Jack, I appreciate it. If you're listening, make sure to go over and follow Jack Hillgrove on X, on social media, everywhere you can find him. I mean, we've worked together several times now. Always super fun. Really appreciate it, Jack, coming on today to talk Aaron Rodgers, and really for nothing in return other than just to talk some football. So thanks, man. We'll talk soon, okay?
Logan, you're the man. Keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate you asking me to come on, and we'll do it again soon.
First ever guest.
I'm honored and
on the
humbled.
show, Jack
I am
Hillgrove.
honored and humbled.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely, dude. All right, Jack Hillgrove, there he goes. That's pretty great stuff right there. And that's all for episode 4. Stay tuned for episode 5 coming soon. Talk soon, Pittsburgh.